We are in the middle of a toxic book boyfriend epidemic. Hi, hello, and welcome back to the channel. I am so excited to get into today's discussion because we are going to be diving into the most toxic book boyfriend tropes that keep popping up in romance, dark romance, and romantasy. And I know you know what I'm talking about. It's the possessiveness being sold as love, the touch her and you die, the secret relationships that are more about shame than they are romance, and of course the classic I hate everyone but you. Don't get me wrong, I love a romantasy and an angsty male main character just as much as the next girl, but these tropes are honestly getting just a bit repetitive, especially whenever they're not written with nuance. I feel as though it insults not only our female main character, but also us as readers, and it really puts our intelligence into question here. So today I want to go ahead and point out some of these tropes, break them down a little bit, and kind of point out why they aren't working. And yeah, without further ado, let's get started. The first trope I want to get into is using possessiveness as a way to show love. This is a common offender in dark romances and in romantasy, and it's whenever books use possessiveness as a way to show the MMC's devotion to our FMC. This might include glaring at or threatening any man who gets within a certain distance of our female main character, as well as the very common phrase, touch her and you die. Hey, I don't want to say that you're being dramatic, but, or she's mine. This really just leads to our male main character treating our female main character as a possession or something to be protected rather than a true equal in a romantic relationship. And let's talk about touch her and you die for a second, because listen, in some of these books, this scene makes sense. We're looking at high stakes scenes such as our female main character has been kidnapped by the rival gang, or maybe she's locked in a warehouse with a knife to her throat, and our MMC is busting in to save the day, and he growls this infamous line, touch her and you die. But sometimes it's really out of place. I'm pretty sure I've seen this scene played out in sports romances where a side male character gets a little handsy with our FMC, and all of a sudden the hockey player is holding him against the wall yelling, touch her and you die. Sir, you play hockey. You have a lot on the line. I'm pretty sure you're not killing anybody tonight or tomorrow night, okay? Let's just be a little honest with ourselves. You have class in the morning. And sure, like I said, sometimes these scenes might make sense, but for me, they only really work if you could also see them playing out in reverse. For example, in the early Throne of Glass books, we can see Chaol protecting Selena a couple of times whenever she's caught unprepared, but we also know that she is entirely capable of holding her own. And we get that kind of reverse payoff in the later books whenever Chaol is trapped in the warehouse and Selena comes in, touch him and you die. You know, it gives me a certain sense of satisfaction whenever I know that both people in the relationship have a certain level of protectiveness and protection. And it also evens that playing field just a little bit. Either way, if this isn't done correctly, it might be framed as protective and caring and even love, but what it really does is undermine our FMC's abilities to stand her ground. It also limits her common sense and ability to be able to determine who or who is not a safe person to be speaking to. Next, I want to get into the locked in a cage trope. Yeah, this is when our MMC isolates our FMC for her own good. Now, this can be literal or figurative, such as literally locking her in a specific location, or just narrowing down the circle of people that it is deemed safe to speak to and controlling kind of where she goes and when she goes there. Some common phrases that I've come across is, I only want what's best for you, or I can't afford to lose you too. Like, wow dude, way to let your trauma control you. The main example that comes to mind whenever I think of this was Rhysand literally wrapping Feyre in a protective bubble while she was pregnant. Yes, I know that this was technically under her consent, but can we really say that this wasn't pressured and controlled by Rhysand, especially considering that this was the royal heir to the throne? Up until this point, we love Rhysand because he has been pitted against Tamlin in the fact that he has given Feyre large amounts of control and the ability to make her own decisions, or at least the most of her decisions that she's able to make considering the context of the story. It might be considered out of character for him whenever he leans into more of this toxic male side of things, However, this wasn't our first time seeing him like this. We can think post-mating bond whenever he literally wanted to throttle anyone who came close to Feyre, including his own best friends, who he allegedly loves and trusts with his life. And Feyre kind of had to steer clear of any people for, what was it, like a week during this process. And I know that this is often excused by him being a Fey male, but I don't know, y'all. I'm not convinced. Because once again, this discounts Feyre's abilities to make decisions that are best for her. And while he oftentimes tells her that he has free will, his actions don't always match up. And let's not mention him and Feyre literally not locking Nesta in a tower. We're not going to get into that one today. Next up, we have the ashamed/secret love. This is when the MMC keeps the FMC hidden from his friends or family because something about her isn't perceived as enough. Now, this might be social status, class, money, bloodline, etc. And we also hardly ever see this specific trope in reverse. It is almost always a man in a position of power in these books, especially in dark romance and in fantasy. Common phrases might be, they wouldn't understand us, or I don't want them to ruin what we have, or the almost manipulative, you're too good for me, while your actions show the complete opposite. I personally think of Kai being ashamed of Peyton in the first Powerless book. Even when nobody knows that she's an ordinary yet, including him, he's still ashamed of his feelings for her. He has cultivated this mask of being the cold, ruthless enforcer, and he is afraid of what vulnerabilities might come out if others can perceive his feelings for her. And there is also a class difference, as he is royalty and she is from the slums. I wonder how much less he might have fought this if the girl that he had fallen in love with was from an acceptable family, and if she would have been deemed as the appropriate person for him to change his ways for. And while we might be able to understand his motivations, it still leads to Peyton feeling less than enough, and it reaffirms what she has been taught her whole life, which is that she is ordinary and therefore she is less than. All in all, this trope tells women that their worth is contingent upon the love and approval of a man and the approval of those whose opinion he holds in high regard. He has to tell her that she is enough for it to be true. It is not enough for her to think it on her own. The next trope that almost always rubs me the wrong way is the billionaire power dynamic. This is when our MMC just so happens to be a billionaire, oftentimes in a small town for some reason. He is the cold playboy who has never valued love until he meets our FMC, and he showers her with gifts and money and attention until she inevitably falls for him. This might include buying her an apartment whenever she's not sure where she's going to live next, paying off her student loans when she's working 2 jobs, or paying for a loved one's medical debt whenever our FMC is weighed heavily by this burden. Common phrases include, you'll never have to work again, or you don't have to worry about things like that now. And listen, I understand why we might want to suddenly escape to a world where we don't have to worry about work or debt or money or really anything at all. But oftentimes these romances start with our FMC not even liking our MMC. Like, not even a little bit. Oftentimes our MMC is downright rude to our FMC in the beginning of the book, and whenever she's not groveling at his feet or doesn't know who he is, suddenly he is infatuated with her and obsessed with this idea of procuring her love. While every other woman is only interested in his money, she isn't interested in him at all, which makes her all the more valuable in his eyes. We often hear that luxury goods are only really luxury because they are exclusive, which inflates their market value. This is kind of the same. He only wants her because he can't have her, and therefore he's willing to spend any amount of money and perform any grand gesture until this changes. This sets up the whole entire relationship on a foundation of a power imbalance. How can we know that he truly loves her or if he's just infatuated with having her? And how can we know if she truly loves him or if she just feels subconsciously indebted to this kindness that he has granted upon her? Also, a lot of these grand gestures include a little bit of mild stalking or hiring a private investigator to find problems for the MMC to magically solve, which, you know, I don't really think I need to go in depth on that one. I think you're smart enough to understand why that might be problematic. On a similar realm of power gaps, we have 400-year age gaps. This is when we have fairy romances where the male main character is over 500 years old, whereas our female main character is a teenage girl. And that's not an exaggeration. She oftentimes is literally a teenage girl. And I don't think that I need to go too in depth here, but can we please finally admit that there is a huge power imbalance in this relationship? He sweeps her away from her current life, places her in a castle. Oftentimes they're in the middle of a war, and she speaks only to him, his friends, and the servants on the grounds. And then they fall in love. You know what I mean? If we're going to do this, can the FMC at least be mentally developed in human terms? Let's make her 25 or even 30. And also, you cannot convince me that a 500-year-old man, I don't care if he's a fairy, you cannot convince me that this man looks to be the same age as our 19-year-old protagonist. Okay? Especially whenever he is a honed, trained warrior who has been fighting in literal wars for centuries. I'm sure this man looks probably in his 30s or maybe even 40s. Fairy or not, if we took them from this fantasy land and placed them in a mall in Central America, people would be guessing if she was his daughter or if she was his wife. Okay? That's uncomfortable. And listen, if they can't at least look the same age, can she have power of her own right, whether it's money or a kingdom? At least in Turn of Glass, while Rowan is hundreds of years old, Aelin is the one with the huge amounts of power and a kingdom. It kind of balances things out just a little bit. And finally, we have the classic I hate everyone but you. I hate everyone but you is whenever our MMC is incapable of being cordial or nice or kind to anybody but our FMC. This can create tension and intimacy, and since the MMC acts like the FMC is the only exception to his hostile and cold nature, this feeds the fantasy of being special enough to change someone's entire world view or personality. It also puts our FMC up on a major pedestal. The MMC's affection isn't about who she truly is, but about her role as his exception. Once you are somebody's exception, you are no longer allowed to be a fully fleshed person. You can no longer make mistakes or have flaws. You are symbolic instead of human. And even if she does lie or hurt him, he oftentimes forgives it immediately because he has decided that she's different. This removes both accountability and depth from our female main characters. Women need to be allowed not only to make mistakes, but to be held accountable for them as well. Being rude, dismissive, or even downright aggressive is framed as edgy or mysterious or sexy, but in reality, it is a huge red flag. If the person that you're with treats everyone around them like trash, eventually that contempt is going to bleed into how they see you or even how you see them. Also, it is exhausting to have to go behind somebody and apologize for their actions all of the time. The media has long since romanticized a jerk with the heart of gold. His meanness is excused because he does have a soft spot. And the more stoic and unemotional this man is, the more rewarding it is and the more valuable it is whenever he does open up to you. Women are tasked with being the cure. In Fourth Wing, Xaden is cold, rude, and sometimes dismissive to everyone, even those that he's supposed to love and protect. He reserves all of his softness for Violet instead. On the surface, this might feel flattering because she's the only one special enough to break down his walls, but in reality, this places an unhealthy and an unrealistic burden on her. She becomes his sole emotional outlet without actually being treated as a trusted and equal partner, considering that he repeatedly holds critical truths from her. Instead of building a balanced romance, this dynamic reduces Violet to a pedestalized figure who carries all of Xaden's feelings but not his trust. And we don't have to get into how that whole entire relationship is healthy in a whole lot of different ways. So yeah, that wraps up my rant on toxic book boyfriend tropes, and honestly, I feel as though we have only scratched the surface. And listen, even when we know these tropes are toxic, we keep reaching for them. And this is because they scratch a very specific itch, and that is high drama, high intensity, and the fantasy that we're going to be the one to change someone. It is messy and it is unhealthy, but it can also be very addictive whenever it's done right. We just have to remember that at the end of the day, this is fantasy, and it is not even a little bit hot or sexy if someone does this to you in real life. So, do these tropes get under your skin? Are they your guilty pleasure? Or is it a little bit of both? Drop your favorite or least favorite examples of toxic tropes in the comments. I would love to see how many of us are tired of seeing the same cliches, and let me know some that you think that I missed. If you like this breakdown, make sure that you hit like and subscribe, and let me know if I should do a breakdown on FMC tropes next. Thanks for watching. Bye.